Welcome to The Explainer. We're driving straight into a really complex and sensitive topic today: India's long and often very debated relationship with refugees. So let's get right to the heart of it. There's this one big question that really shapes the whole conversation in India. How exactly do you tell the difference between a refugee, someone genuinely seeking safety, and an infiltrator? If you look at it on paper, it seems pretty clear, right? A refugee is looking for asylum. An infiltrator is someone who's undocumented. But the problem, as India's Home Minister himself has noted, is how do you actually apply fair, objective rules in the real world? It's a huge challenge, especially when you don't have a dedicated law to fall back on. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the core problem, the predicament. Then, we'll talk about the legal gap that's at the center of all this. After that, we'll see how this leads to really inconsistent treatment for different groups. We'll also touch on the big flashpoint, the CAA. And finally, we'll ask, what's the path forward? All right, let's start with this central paradox. It's a big one. For decades, India has opened its doors to a huge number of people fleeing for their lives. But it does all of this without having a single, formal, national rulebook to guide the process. And we're not talking about a small number here. As of June 2023, we're looking at over 211,000 refugees and people of concern in India. These are people coming from all over, especially from neighboring countries like Myanmar, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. And here's the absolute kicker, the thing you really need to understand. India is managing this huge population, all while not being a signatory to the main international agreement on refugees, the 1951 UN Convention. That single decision has shaped pretty much everything that follows. So you're probably wondering, right? If India isn't part of that big UN treaty, how does it manage all these people? Well, that question takes us straight to the heart of the problem, what we're calling the legal gap. Instead of one clear law, India uses this patchwork of different laws. You've got stuff that's been around since before independence, like the Foreigners Act, mixed in with more modern laws like the Citizenship Act. But here's the problem. None of them, not a single one, was actually written for refugees. They're just general laws about foreigners. And that has a really, really serious consequence. Because there's no official legal category for refugee, anyone without the right papers, even someone fleeing for their life, can be legally branded an illegal migrant. Just like that. And this leaves them incredibly vulnerable, facing the constant threat of harassment or even being sent back. So, what does this legal vacuum actually look like on the ground for the people caught in the middle? Well, it means that instead of having clear rules, everything is based on discretion. And that leads to wildly different outcomes for different groups of people. And you can see this ad hoc approach so clearly when you just compare two groups. Take Tibetan refugees, for example. They have a formal rehabilitation policy that was put in place in 2014. But then you look at Sri Lankan Tamils, a group that's actually larger and has been in India for decades, and there's no formal policy document for them at all. What this all boils down to is that the kind of help or even the legal status a refugee gets can totally depend on where they're from or their ethnicity. It's not based on a consistent set of rates. It's like having different measuring sticks for people who are all in the exact same desperate situation. This long history of inconsistency and ad hoc policies, it was suddenly thrown into the global spotlight with the introduction of one very controversial law, the Citizenship Amendment Act, better known as the CAA. So, what was the CAA supposed to do? Well, the stated aim was pretty specific. It was designed to give a path to Indian citizenship for 6 specific religious minorities who had fled persecution from 3 neighboring countries: Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. But the act sparked immediate and widespread criticism. Why? Well, critics argued it was fundamentally exclusionary. It didn't include persecuted Muslim groups like the Rohingyas from Myanmar, and it also left out other groups like the Sri Lankan Tamils we just talked about. This led to serious accusations that the law was discriminating based on religion. Okay, so after all that, the legal gaps, the inconsistencies, the controversy, we're left with the most important question of all, right? What's the solution here? Where do we go from here? There is a quote from the material we're looking at that just nails the proposed solution. It says that providing humanitarian relief is great, it's essential, but it has to be backed up by something more. It needs consistent, rational, and fair treatment for all. That's the key phrase. And really, that's the bottom line. The big call to action here is for India to finally move away from that messy patchwork of old laws and ad hoc decisions. The proposed solution is a single, comprehensive national refugee policy, a real, formal framework that clearly defines who a refugee is and guarantees fair, non-discriminatory treatment for anyone seeking asylum in India. And that leaves us with one final, big question to think about. As India moves forward, what should a fair and uniform refugee policy actually include? How can it balance its own national security with its deep-rooted humanitarian traditions? The answers to that question will literally shape the future for millions of people.